I'll tell you when to bring people on, Eliza. I
Okay,
am
so
going
I'm
to now,
admitting these people
not yet,
and
not yet, not yet. I'll tell you when.
okay.
We are now going to start on Facebook. Just give me one moment. Let me actually pause the recording and start letting people in. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm very excited to be here with all of you. We are streaming on Zoom and also on Facebook Live. So we've got a whole bunch of people here with us. And thank you for joining us today. Today's panel discussion features 3 artists who are working on installations for Owning Earth, an exhibition that will open at Unison Arts in New Paltz, New York in September of 2020. This is part of a series of public panel discussions with the artists in the show that have been taking place every 2 weeks on Sundays at 4 p.m. Each panel has a theme. Past panels have focused on impossible futures, scientific approaches, restorative politics, precarity, and all of these will be available on Unison Arts' website. Our panel on art for non-humans was postponed, and we'll be rescheduling this and sending out invitations soon. For those of you who are joining us, just a technical note. Please keep yourselves muted, and actually best if for the duration of the presentations, turn your videos off as well. And for the discussion, you can turn your videos on, and we'll be happy to kind of just have an open discussion together. So hi, I'm Tal Beery. I'm curating Owning Earth, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. Erin Antonek is the brilliant and talented assistant curator of this show, and she will not be able to join us on the call today. You know, I've been doing these a bunch, and I think it's always great to start every event off with a word of thanks. And first, especially to the team and staff at Unison Arts. That's Alex Baer, Alexis Agnew, Ali Bell, Rob Leitner, and Francis Wu. Thank you so much for your support of this project. You know, Unison Arts, like most arts organizations, has faced an entirely unprecedented moment with COVID. And also, like most arts nonprofits in the US that do not experience significant government support, Unison is both highly vulnerable to economic disruptions of any kind, and at the same time, absolutely critical to near and long-term recovery for economic disruptions, which puts them in a really rough place. You know, the arts support social cohesion and resilience, and in many cases, they provide direct services to neighbors. You know, Unison has been doing that for over 40 years. And it counts on ticket sales to events to stay afloat. And without that revenue, they're even more in need of community help than ever before. So everyone watching now, consider pitching in and donating to Unison Arts. I recommend a minimum of $10, but sizable donations are encouraged. Also, check out Unison's other online offerings at unisonarts.org. I'll be putting links to Unison Arts and Unison Arts' donation page in the chat after my introduction. So I'd like to also say another word of thanks to another brilliant group of folks who are the members of Unison's Sculpture Committee. They include Matthew Friday, Eliza Evans, who will be speaking today, Sarah Warren, Karali Pitzley, and Michael Asbill. They've just been incredibly supportive and have helped to guide a vision for Unison's outdoor exhibitions that links arts and ecology, and is really timely and inspiring. And I'm grateful that Owning Earth is a part of that vision. So thank you. So for those of you who don't already know, Owning Earth is a 2-year outdoor sculptural exhibition that brings together an emerging movement of artists whose land-based works question notions of control. The importance of the questions at the core of this show have only been underscored by recent events, I think. The pandemic has done a great job in making clear that human mastery over our environment is by no means complete. And the continuing murders of African Americans by police makes the intolerable cruelty of our systems of domination impossible to ignore. But what cultures and what institutions lie beyond mastery, control, domination, possession. How might we rethink and restructure our relationships with knowledge, with the non-human world, with the human world? So the 20 artist projects in Owning Earth will be asking these big questions over a 2-year period, and will be accompanied by a series of workshops and performances to bring critical attention to these issues to audiences of all ages and backgrounds. So our presentations today are on the theme of roots and rooting. And I'd like to start the discussion off with a quote from Leroy Littlebear, who's a Blackfoot researcher and a founding member of Canada's first Native American Studies Department at the University of Lethbridge. He said during a panel discussion that followed a screening of the short film Iniskim, which is about the reintroduction of the buffalo in the Western Plains. So he says, when you step back and look at the chaos today, it tells us how fragile what we refer to as normal really is. You know, he goes like this, he says, normal. He says, why is it fragile? It's fragile because we are forgetting all about the deep-rooted fundamental aspects of life. All we're after is simple, immediate personal wants and desires, consumatory notions on a daily basis. That's what makes the existing system so fragile. I mean, he's an incredibly wise elder of the Blackfoot Nation, and I recommend everybody look him up. And personally, I connect very strongly with this idea, which if I were to put it in my own words, would be something like, you know, we live in a world where more people than ever feel an overall level of disconnection, you know, from other people, from their histories, from what is beyond them, far greater than in any other time in memory, perhaps. And you know, while lots of folks connect this feeling with other feelings of overall anxiety and depression, it's also important to recognize that these feelings make our institutions and societies fragile, very fragile. We see the effects of this every day. You know, but we also live in a world of movement. It's not so easy to connect with our roots. And our roots can be less clear now than ever. And if we can identify our roots, how do we even connect with them? How do we keep those connections relevant in such a quickly changing world? So the artists with us today have proposed projects for Owning Earth that relate to these themes, and I'm really looking forward to getting going. Alejandro Chellet will start us off, followed by Melinda Kiefer and Eliza Evans, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So let's get going. Alejandro is a Mexican multidisciplinary artist. He's an independent curator and a permaculture designer based between Mexico City, New York, and the Hudson Valley. In his art, he addresses the misplaced core principles of coexistence, the loss of connection with nature, and the political and environmental context of urban societies. His artwork is broad. It ranges from social practice to site-specific installations, performances with broccoli. I think if many of you saw the invitation images, you would see that. Artivism, improvisation, somatic movement, politics. He's got so many themes in his work. His artwork has been shown at many festivals and museums and galleries in Europe, Asia, North America, South America. He's been all over the place. And he is currently, I believe, in Mexico City, which has been his pandemic hideout. And so I'm really excited to introduce Alejandro Chellet. Take us away.
Hi, hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm really excited to present my project for you today. So I'm going to start right away, and I'm clicking my time so I don't overdo. Okay, so I'm going to share you guys my screen about this presentation I have created for you today. So, all right, so just confirm me you're actually watching my screen. Yes? Okay, so I'll start the presentation. Everything correct, right? You still see the screen. Okay, so this is the Hickster Oven, and it's a project for this exhibition only. It has been fought for that. It's still in a development phase, and I would like to just read out the questions that have inspired me to get to this work, and then I'll continue with the slides. So I think, what will be the future of the Hudson Valley and even the Catskills with the current and the upcoming housing developments? what is the gauge to know when will Kingston City be like the upstate Brooklyn? Or like by moving to the countryside, are these people who are moving there are they're going to be capable to change their lifestyles? I mean, their consumer practices and ideal dwellings to a more sustainable, self-reliable, and rooted ones? Or is it only about finding an affordable rent or lower property cost? I mean, are people's life principles who moved from the country still remaining as the same as when they used to live in the city? So, so I think this is the comparison. I mean, the lifestyle, like, you know, whether you swim in a river polluted with radioactive or whatever oil chemicals to a nice river that you can even possibly even drink the water, or it just supplies the water for the city, right? So I think this is a reality we're all experiencing, and I mean, I came to the Hudson Valley in 2014, and really just like because of the water and the fields and all of these like old barns and these beautiful farms and everything has really enchanted me to be there and be part of these. So, you know, it's like I have like my friends who work in an art farm in Rosendale, or I have even participated as a volunteer in an organic conventional farm in Roxbury in the Catskills, which is very different ways even of doing agriculture. So I think, you know, in this respect, like I really like the farms that are like, I mean, there is something about these ancient farms that have been left behind and have been abandoned in the whole region of New York upstate. And I think it's something that now they have been getting to be reoccupied, but with people coming from the city. So I think I have found myself, well, this is not myself, this is my friend's dad, but I think this is myself. So I have found myself in this place, and I really feel like I'm connected to it. And I mean, there was a transformation that happened, obviously. I mean, I'm a guy from the city, and then I happened to start doing farming, and I suddenly also like started to connect with shamanism and like in understanding that there is something else than just like living in the city. And I mean, working the land, it's a way I think that can transform you. And obviously, if you have your volunteers, work is easier, right? So this basically like, you know, I think the beauty of living in a farm, it's that you can just walk to a garden every day and basically enjoy these, right? Like you can just basically have access to nature, have access to flowers, to space, to trees, to wind, to feel the wind. So I think these are like all the things that we're looking for. I mean, like, you know, like you come to the garden and there are your friends working and you all are like looking towards creating your own food. And I think that's like the crucial thing in living off in the countryside. It's that you have this connection like all the time, like it's part of your lifestyle. But I mean, like, you know, there are like situations, I mean, like this farm particularly, it's like performance art mixing with like, you know, musicians, and people are coming from all different backgrounds, and we're all meeting in the Hudson Valley every summer, and we're creating a community. And it's a community that has grown, that it's like have created deep meaningful relationships. But I mean, there is also quiet. There is also like space and tranquility and contemplation and quietness, which I think is really important for all of us who have lived in cities and we seek for something else different. So I think that's the main element, I think, that we look for when we move. It's the quietness. But there is always work. You got to keep working all the time. You got to make fire. You got to provide yourself with what you need. So the work is always involved. And obviously, if it's in a teamwork, for example, these are the resident artists and volunteers at this art farm in Rosendale. And I mean, we have a good time. We work hard. We basically cook all our meals. We have a beautiful bounty every day. You know, we harvest, and you know, like there is always the manure. You gotta keep adding to your compost and to your soils. You always gotta keep the cycles going. You can't cut the cycle. So you know, these are more pictures of the artist like in the kitchen and in the garden. And I mean, now I'm coming to where I come from to this project. So this was the background, and now the project, I'm inspired by, like, you know, artists like Soon, who did this community floating in the Hudson River or in Venice with all their friends, or like Jill Sigmund, who has built these huts across the US and Europe and has made them habitable spaces where, you know, she interacts with other artists or other people, or like Future Farmers. It's a project by Flatbread Society in Oslo, in Norway, who has developed this boat where they make flatbread, and then they created a space in an occupied allotment where they created a whole project to feed people with bread. So, you know, this is an existing structure that I have built in Rosendale as well with bamboo, and I'm planning to use these elements, these bamboo Guadua angustifolia elements. And so these are my previous installation outdoor works that I know I'm 7 minutes. I'll try and be shorter. So these projects, you know, they have been like basically like different, sorry, just like, let's say, like, you know, installations where I interact with people. The one on the left, it's a house of fire. It's an installation with bamboo and cob, and I would move with the wind, and it's like an offering to the fire as an element that's the settler spirit. And on the right is the house of the straw, which is an installation that criticizes housing and like our ideals of housing. So it's just like different kinds of elements that are used. I like using natural elements. And so for this specific project, it's an oven. So like we have examples like the solar oven in Oaxaca, or, you know, these other clay stoves, or this construction of a clay oven in Rio de Janeiro with the shape of a fish. So this was like the construction of the clay oven that we currently have right now in the Hudson Valley. And so this is the clay oven in functionality. This is basically the clay oven, like just being there, doing what it does, feeds people, creates community. And so this is another picture. And so this is where the project came from, basically, where I started to think that this could become an art piece. If you look closely, I have already fooled you, because there is a TV there's a TV embedded into the structure, and that's the oven that you're looking at. Right now, this is a TV. It's like a recording of the oven, and it's a projection. So the project comes from there, but obviously I cannot place a TV. You know, I mean, like my project is like, the idea is to make this oven in a functional way, and obviously I have a public program that, you know, allows people to come and experience this oven. In this case, I was playing with this element of the TV and the projection at night also. So it's like people wouldn't tell at night that there was a TV on. So people are fooled, you know, but so it comes from there. And I start to think, wow, this is like the most fake representation, you know, of reality, but at the same time, it is very kind of true. So I don't know. So what I'm trying to do is to build this oven in Unison Art Center and create a series of public programs where I can get people to come and learn with me about natural building, and we can make reflections on what's to live in the countryside, if they come from the city or if they're locals. Thank you.
Yeah, great. I think that's really funny. I really like the idea of of the of the television instead of the. It's like it really is you know, it's the opposite, isn't it? um, Thank you, Alejandro. Our next up is Melinda Kiefer, who is a multidisciplinary artist, whose work examines how art provides us one of the last spaces for the sensory imagination to confront and transform what she sees as the monoculture that presently engulfs the world. She's been a member of performance groups participating in DIY spaces. She's been a member of performance groups that have participated in DIY spaces in Baltimore and Brooklyn since 2014. Her recent exhibitions include September Gallery, Pari Passu, Flowers for All Occasions, which was a solo, Contemporary Petite Gallery, and she's been an artist in residence at Eco Practicum, which is a program that I run. And she's taught drawing classes as well as experimental yoga and art classes at Purchase College, which she continued at September Gallery in Hudson, New York. She's currently a teaching artist with Brick Arts Media in Brooklyn and is preparing for an immersive installation with her partner at Hilo Art at in Catskill. Hilo in Catskill, New York. That's opening this fall. Everybody say hello to Melinda.
All right, hi everybody. I just first off want to thank Tal so much for organizing this. And as he mentioned, I worked with him at Eco Practicum as well as School of the Apocalypse and also at SUNY Purchase. So thank you again. Thank you all the other artists that have been participating in these panels. It's been such a pleasure and joy to see all of your presentations virtually and feel a sense of community, even remotely. And I hope to meet all of you in person one day soon. And some of you I do already know from Purchase. Also, thank you, Alejandro, for your really fun presentation. And I'm excited also for Eliza, who again, I know from Purchase, and it's an honor to continue to work with you all. And also, thank you, Alex Bear from the Unison Art Center. I have not met you yet, but you picked up a bathtub for me for my project and transported it in a truck, and it's at Unison. So thank you so much for helping me with my project. So I'm gonna go, I have a timer, and I'm gonna share my screen and get started. Okay. All right, I think everybody can see this. So I have some examples of previous work. So I'm just gonna give a quick overview of themes in my previous work, and then I'm going to explain my grotto ship project for Owning Earth. So as you can see, I use a lot of colors, a lot of different materials, and I use pretty colorful objects that are natural from the world around me, and then also from my material capitalist consumer world, and I mix them together. I'm interested in collaging states of consciousness together through the literal heterogeneous mixing of materials, and sometimes making larger sculptures where the body can physically move through the space, working as a liminal portal. So these are examples of different works. This is a larger anthropomorphic series of trash sculptures as well. I also create books that play with alterity and intervention. Sometimes I take the books with me into nature to try to reconcile our effects on the land, even in a symbolic gesture. This particular book, the title is Art, Magic, and the Anthropocene. I wrote an article about these themes. And I also plan to write an article and make an artist book about my work with Unison. This is another book. It was originally called A Day in the Life of America. It was a photojournalist project that I found at a thrift store, and then I traveled around the country with me to different sites and worked on it again to try to put my almost a form of healing on the different forms of oppression and dominance that we have in so many ways in our total mind view of this world. I'm also currently making mushroom paintings because I like foraging for them or wildcrafting them. And then also, I think they have a lot that we can learn from. So this is a chicken of the woods mushroom, Latophorus surforus. This is chaga, and this is an oyster mushroom. It's often used in mycoremediation, and there's different types of mushrooms. Perhaps you're familiar with mycorrhizal, where it's a companion relationship, companion species, where they have a symbiotic relationship. These mushrooms are saprobic, where they feed on decomposition and decay, the dead. And I find them really fascinating because they really, I think they're truly a sustainable species that we can learn a lot from. I think they are good as a literal and a metaphor for where are the decomposers in our society, which I think is arguably hyper producer and consumer. And I think that maybe artists can work in this way to decompose the structures of oppression, of silencing otherness, of literal things where we are draining the planet, but also our mindset against other ways of being, which I think is relating to many issues. This is the picture from Ecopracticum where I worked at Vital, and I made a walking meditation labyrinth. It's based off a traditional structure used for, again, walking meditation. It's a spiral. It's intended just to slow people down and literally root them to the earth. We participated barefoot to try to, again, reshift our relationship to earth, kind of in the way that social permaculture tries to reshift our human culture with along the landscape of natural culture as all kind of one culture interacting with each other. So I'm going to jump now into the sketch. This is what I proposed for Owning Earth. I'm calling it the Grotto Ship Bathtub Madonna. So my family, especially my mother, that side of my family is very proudly Italian Catholic, Italian-American Catholic. And I was steeped, for better or worse, in a very rich, I would say, mystical tradition of Catholicism. And I think it's, whether I like it or not, has really influenced my aesthetics and maybe even why I'm an artist. So this project for Owning Earth, I'm digging into that history of these particularly bathtub Madonnas that I grew up with and I find really fascinating. These basically DIY home lawn Mary shrines that are echoing the actual grotto shrines, these watery earth caves back in Italy. The other image was from Lourdes, France, where the original Madonna appeared to Saint Bernadette in the 1800s. So these bathtubs that people use are imitating this natural structure, and then now they even make, you can buy at lawn decor shrines these like bathtub-like structures with your gnome or with your other I don't know, flamingo or whatnot. So I think it's just interesting how belief and the sacred has been just translated in all these different material ways, and especially what the potential is with this Mary when we look at her in relation to the negative sacred and in an impure way, because nothing is pure, which I think also relates to a sustainable viewpoint. So I am going to be taking elements from kind of Western folk magic practices in Southern Italy before the West was, or Catholicism was patented upon that and shifted it. And there's a lot of other references of it. So this image here, I placed these very elaborate grotto shrines on the left with earthship structures on the right. Earthship structures, whether, I'm not sure, your familiarity, but they were created by Michael Reynolds in the 1970s in Taos, New Mexico. And I think that these green architectures also can be critiqued because, again, nothing is pure. There's organic food, but it's coming from across the world of fossil fuel, or there's solar panels that are created using, I guess, fossil fuel or not sustainable materials, or recycling can use a lot of material energy as well. So I think what's so cool about art is that you can try to explore the paradoxical nature of things and the pure and impure and the relationship to it. So on the right, the earthship uses kind of what Alejandro was saying, that it uses a lot of cob and passive solar energy where it naturally heats and cools, but also uses recycled industrial materials like tires and glass bottles. So on the upper right hand, these are people using the tire walls, and these are other just there's adobe on the lower left. Roundhouses are also very efficient on the upper right. And again, I'm not a professional architect or builder, but I'm really interested in I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I work in sculpture, but I'm exploring the elements of architecture to try to make this hybrid, sustainable structure for spirits, you can say, or for our own thoughts or relationships to the earth. I also put in the middle images from Arco Santi in Arizona, which I think is a really interesting experimental city where they try to not have cars, and they also use passive solar energy. So basically, this is a little color sketch I have for what I plan to build soon at Owning Earth. It's going to be a hybrid shrine with sustainable building elements. I'm going to flip back for a second. The lower right image is a technique called wattle and daub. The wattle, it's been around for over 6,000 years. The wattle is straw and branches woven together to make a lattice-like structure. And then the daub is earth, potentially dung, sand and straw put together and sealed in to make these walls. So the sculpture I plan to build will have an old bathtub and then have these walls and then also have found materials. I might use a little bit of sustainable grout, eco-friendly apparently, I hope, and I think it should be, with some stones and oceanic other material, like shells and the blue color and branches to, again, make this kind of more other Mary of an altar of alterity that will slowly decay over time. And I think that is it for me. I will stop my screen. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Melinda. Woo. You know, that was the first time that you've ever been so explicit about how your Catholicism has affected you as an artist, or like kind of like your Catholic upbringing. And I think it's fascinating. I mean, we've talked about, we've talked about this so many times. But I mean, I think it's just really important and really interesting. And thank you so much for that. That was great. And hopefully we can get more into that in the discussion today. Eliza Evans is up next. She experiments with sculpture, print, video, textiles, and to identify disconnections and absurdities in social, economic, and ecological systems. The initial parameters of each of her works are carefully researched. So she's a research-based artist. And then her work evolves as a result of interaction with people, with time and weather. I really appreciate the way she works. And I think a lot of her approach comes as a result of her background, which I'm sure we'll get into. Evans was born in a Rust Belt steel town, and she was raised in rural Appalachia. She currently splits her time between New York City and the Hudson Valley. And her work has been exhibited in a whole bunch of places. Lately she's got a show up at Thomas Urban Gallery that I think, hopefully Eliza just flagged that. I think you should mention it to folks, and maybe even include a link to it in the chat here, because it's a really interesting show. It's about ecofeminism. Lately she's shown at Edward Hopper House Museum in Nyack, New York. She's been a resident at Chautauqua Institution in Chautauqua, New York. She's been a resident at Shashama Sculpture Field in Pine Plains, at Brick Brooklyn, at Purchase College. And other residencies have included National Center for Ecological Analysis and Synthesis at UC Santa Barbara, my God. She has an MFA from SUNY Purchase College in Visual Art, and also a PhD in Economic Sociology from the University of Texas at Austin. With no further ado, Eliza Evans, take it away. Oh, and by the way, we got a note in the chat from Adele Eisenstein. It says, fantastic show, Ecofeminisms at Thomas Urban through July 24th. Yes, indeed. See that? I wasn't lying. See, Adele knows what's up. So Eliza, take it away.
Right. Thanks, Tal.
Sure.
Okay, what am I doing here? Okay, well, I just want to really appreciate my thanks and gratitude to Tal and to Alex at Unison. They're both doing huge amounts of work to pull this off in the context of these times. And I think it's really going to be worth it. So when we start to roll in September and continue for the next 2 years, I hope everybody takes advantage of what Tall and Unison are putting together, because it's going to be outside, and it really can be something for everyone to enjoy. So thanks, everybody. And I really enjoyed these conversations and getting to know everybody a little bit beforehand. So thanks, everybody, for coming out. Okay. So, share screen. Okay. So that's my name. That's where to find me. Let me, and I'm going to give real quick just 2 pieces as a bit of background. I do a lot of ecologically related art. Not everything is, but here are 2 pieces that are. This is a public installation on the Purchase College campus. It's now well into its 3rd year. And it was only supposed to last a year. And I guess the campus gods wanted to see what would actually happen. These are live trees that are completely wrapped in heat shrink plastic. So these trees have been under enormous stress for several years through various snowstorms and heat waves. But life is resilient. So in some of these trees, little shoots have sprouted through the plastic. And when that happens, a couple students and sometimes faculty send me pictures of it, which is always a delight. But this is something that students, because they'll pass by this at least several times a week over the course of their career, it's really meant to unfold for them. So it's really a time-based piece. This is some new work that really came out of my wintering over in Ulster County this past winter, because anybody who spends any time in the Hudson Valley or the Catskills or even Western PA knows that the forest is practically nude up to about 5 feet, and it's because of there are too many deer, and there are lots of reasons for that, and because there are too many deer and too few resources, they're not in great shape. So I started looking at how hunters address this problem of both caring for the deer, feeding them, and then crafting their land to be attractive and hospitable to them, but at the same time maneuvering them through the landscape ultimately so that they can be shot and dressed and dispatched. And when I found their drawings of their own land, I was really taken. Many of these are like from drone footage or Google Maps, and then they'll augment them digitally. And I thought they were really interesting drawings. And so I appropriated them, I turned them into textile patterns and had them woven on computerized jacquard looms. And some of you may know that the jacquard loom is actually the mechanical model for the very first computer. So it's taking full circle, surveillance, which hunters do, incessantly, and intimacy. And so these fabrics are tapestries, but they're also turned into soft home goods like pillows and throws and tablecloths. And so this is an ongoing project, and this is one example. But the project I'm doing for Unison is All the Way to Hell. And it has numerous instantiations. And at Unison, I will be doing a 3D piece. But it's very much rooted in keeping with the theme of this talk in my own family history and to place. So much of what I do is rooted in a particular landscape. And this really unpromising piece of property kind of belongs to me. And I say kind of because it's in Creek County, Oklahoma. I have never been to Oklahoma. I inherited 3 acres from a great aunt a couple years back, and I never really thought much of it until recently, where I have been getting random letters from oil and gas companies who would like to drill on this land. So it's not owning the land, I own the minerals. And I really took a deep dive into what that meant, because I had no idea. And what they're looking for underneath this land is something very much like this. This is a piece of shale pulled out of the ground from roughly 11,000 feet below surface. Fracking can happen these days as far as 15,000 feet underground. That's almost 3 miles, and the technology keeps getting better and better. So although I only own 3 acres, the depth is immense. So here I am potentially being personally implicated into the fossil fuel industry. And I'm frankly, I'm not having it, but because I own so little, I just decided to obsess on this and figure out a way around it. So I'm a sculptor, so I'm a materials fetishist, and I'm really intrigued by this. When we think of reservoirs of oil, I think most of us think of pools. Shale is the consistency of clay, which is why it has to be blown to bits to extract the oil and the gas. So it has a real materiality that those who visit owning Earth physically will be able to touch and to explore with their own hands and their own eyes. And this is an installation shot from Ecofeminism at Thomas Urban, which, as the note says, will be up through July 24th. And, oh, I am stuck. Okay, and this is my piece. So these are well core samples stacked vertically. The top one is roughly at 2,000 feet below the surface, and the bottom one is from roughly 14,000 feet below the surface. Again, getting at the materiality. And these belong to the oil companies. I had a really hard time getting my hands on them, but now I have a source, because this is data storage. This is valuable information. This is their archive. This is how oil companies are rooted in the landscape. And these are the materials I'll be working with in Owning Earth. So back briefly, here's the land. My bit, theoretically, is that little green dot. So I own 3 acres within 150 acres. And the oil companies need to wrap up 640 acres as a square mile. And here I'm going in, if you'll excuse me going into the law, because the law in the conceptual part of the piece is very much the medium I'm deploying here. So if they want to drill my green dot, they have to get everybody who owns everything within the yellow square. They have to seek out the owners, prove they own it, sign leases, and file everything with the appropriate authorities. So my little green dot within a square mile has no leverage. They can force me to be drilled even if I say no. The law allows that. But oh, if you are looking at this the way I am, you might want to switch your view so that you can see the graphic on the right. So my 3 acres, in theory, goes all the way to the center of the earth according to US law. And that law is referred to as the ad coelum doctrine. And it's, ancient common law that whosoever is in the land, it is there all the way to heaven and all the way to hell. This is why in New York City, buildings can sell off their air rights, because they own it. So what I propose to do to augment the physical instantiation of the project is to divide up my property into 1,000 units and to sell each off individually. I would give it away, but going through the process of selling the land and redeeding it to someone actually does cost a little bit of money, but I think we can achieve a really great end with not a lot of resources. So right now, I can sell off 1/1000th of this 3 acres of mineral rights that goes all the way to the center of the earth for about 65 bucks. And the 1,000 of us can present a serious impediment to the potential drillers, because the oil company will have to track down every single one of us, give us an offer for accessing our mineral rights, try to execute a lease, and file it with the county clerk. This is a huge administrative burden that is mostly done by go-between consultants. So it's not even the oil companies absorbing the cost. So and these consultants are called landmen. Even the women are called landmen. So any professional is going to look at this and just walk away because it is way too big of a headache. So this is about 1,000 people working in concert to this is a 100-year sit-in, and that as long as we hang on to it. And it's a model for others who own these same kind of mineral rights to act similarly. So I'm using the law. This mineral deed is just as much a medium for this work as the shale pieces you saw earlier. And I had hoped to do this in person through events at Unison, going to art residencies all over the country, taking these deeds to arts and crafts fairs, church bazaars, and really having a high touch interaction with people. But because of COVID, I can't do that now. So I find myself now I have an online project. You're welcome to visit. It's not completely live because I have a few legal details that will be worked out very soon. I mean, this is happening. There's no doubt about it. So I have an online business selling my mineral rights through an LLC that is called All the Way to Hell. And it's an adjunct to the Unison project. So this project is archive, this project is land art, this project is participatory art, it's activist art. And in order to accomplish all those, I had to do it as an online business. So for those of you still hanging on, I beg, implore, encourage everyone to come out for Owning Earth when it's finally up, which is not a single event. It will unfold over 2 years. Join the Owning Earth mailing list, but if you have any interest in learning more about this particular project, please reach out, because this is also an ongoing thing. And I'm really pleased that people will be able to connect with it physically as a part of Owning Earth. So thanks.
Woo! Thank you, Eliza.
Sure.
All right, so 3 very different approaches for sure. So I want to just open it up to questions right now. And if you want, you can feel free to unmute yourself and turn on your video if you have a question for any of our artists. I guess I'd like to start with Alex, with Alejandro, and ask him, because you were the first to speak, so I might as well just ask you a question and bring you back into the conversation. How has your experience during the pandemic affected any of your feelings around artwork that brings folks together? Has it reinforced it? Has it kind of complicated your relationship? Because I know a lot of your art, or especially the work that you're proposing for Owning Earth, is very specifically about encouraging interaction and what it means to interact with others. You spoke about your work as being kind of a platform for interaction and engagement. What does interaction and engagement mean today? Does it mean anything different? How's your thinking evolving?
I think that's a very interesting question, actually, Tal, because I think as an artist myself, I see myself as a person that it's breaking ice, or rupturing, I think I started to think through this pandemic, if it was gonna be like us, like the artists that we're gonna actually break the ice, literally, like that we were gonna actually that we be the ones going out on the street and daring to like gather or dare to like think that we can already, you know, whether it's like safe or not safe, what it like, I don't know. It's just like I thought maybe it's the artists or at least performance artists that, you know, because we work with our body. Indeed, it's like our tool. It's our work of art, our body, and what we can express with it. So we have to be seen. We have to be interactive with other people. And I think whether it has to, I mean, it started to already happen via online, but I think it has to happen in life. And I think in a way, I think, yes, there might be some disruptive things now and controversial opinions about this, but I think in a way, art is the one that has to be, you know, that has to come back. And in a way, it's really sad to also see that authorities in many countries have considered art the least essential activity of humans. So at the same time, I feel like, why is art the least essential thing, you know, to nurture our culture and our spirit? Why is that the least essential thing of all of them? So that's just one of my questions that also came with the pandemic and, you know, my feeling to it.
It's very interesting. You know, I had a conversation just on Thursday with one of our politicians here, elected representatives here in Sullivan County, and you know, she was saying, you know, we were talking about funding for the arts, and she was saying, like, I've got tons of families that just don't have food right now, and we're spending so much of our time making sure that hungry people get fed. You know, and it's interesting to me because in the context of this conversation, because your work is literally like feeding people, and I really appreciate what you brought up, but it's a kind of complicated by this whole thing of, I think you brought it up yourself, but it's like, yes, maybe the arts, maybe artists need to be at the front lines of reopening society, perhaps. But it's strange when reopening has become politicized in this way, where, you know, you can't reopen and still retain this kind of like solidarity with the people who are in need of people most vulnerable to this pandemic. You know what I mean? It almost seems like the courage that you're describing needs to go almost the other way, almost of disappearing from these what we generally consider to be public spaces. Maybe the whole notion of public space is changing completely. I mean, how do you feel? I mean, I guess I'll just throw it right back at you, and maybe there'll be another, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think public space is changing, and through different conversations that I have with people, it's a reality. Although public space, it's like one of the most, like, for me, public space is the studio. That's my studio. That's where all inspiration comes from. Materials come from the street most of times, where I create, you know, when I'm in cities, right? And in urban environments. But I think it's so rich, urban space within just the neighborhood, and the changing from one street to another avenue, like it already changed so much, the people, everything, but not just like one neighborhood or a city, but imagine countries. So just a quick example is like in Canada, my artists from performance networks were already planning to do something on the streets as a political thing, because it was already forbidden to be in public space doing something cultural through the pandemic. But in Mexico, that's not even a reality. There is not even a legislation about like whether laws has changed about public space or not. So we could go out now here in Mexico City and do whatever we want, and we wouldn't be seen just the moral aspect, but like legally there wouldn't be a frame to, you know, that we will be confronting. So I think public space is just so vast, and it's so specific to locations that, I mean, it's a universe. So I think we should just keep playing with it.
I mean, I would love it if your installation, and this is part of the reason why I'm happy to involve you in the show. I'm really interested in your installation creating or maybe encouraging a feeling of public space at Unison, at the Sculpture Garden. We need that more than ever. I mean, it's lucky that Unison Sculpture Garden is, you know, accessible 24/7 and free to the public, you know. But I mean, public space has to be activated somehow. It can't simply be just a free space, you know. Public space has to encourage dialogue and connection. It has to be a space for contingency. And I really hope that your piece does that, and it's looking like it will. And I'm very excited that you're with us. Yes, there's somebody who wants to. Okay, do you want to ask a question? Feel free, of course. Let me see. Maybe there's a. Let me see. Ask to start video. Feel free to jump in. Okay. And if not, then I have. Are you there? We got a technical difficulty. In the meantime, I wanted to. Okay. Okay. Are you? Okay. Here we go.
Hey. Hi.
Hello. You're on
Hi,
the
Alejandro.
air.
Thank you for your awesome presentation, and ladies as well. Eliza, I love what you do. I want to buy a scrap of your place in Oklahoma. Can you hear me?
Yes, you got it.
Yeah. I'm sorry. And Melinda, your work is beautiful as well. So I guess I just wanted to say that as a comment. And I like what you're doing.
Hey, thanks so much.
And as does Jill.
All right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Carry
That's
on.
nice.
You can see Robin in the back, actually.
Oh, hey, look at that.
Let's see.
Nice. Hello.
Yeah, we're just over here in Rosendale. So.
Oh, great. That's
Did you
great.
show the oven?
They can see it.
Oh.
Okay, so that's all.
Thanks so much.
It's an excellent talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us. So Melinda, I wanted to ask you a question. You're kind of in the middle between this idea of public space and a very kind of personal space. Your installation for Owning Earth is very much a kind of it seems to me like you're kind of creating a way for you to engage productively with Catholicism. You know what I'm saying? Like you're kind of merging these two sides of yourself, this like earthship kind of I don't want to call it hippie, but a DIY aesthetic that's kind of part of this, part of your background and part of something that you've really kind of adopted for yourself. And then your Catholicism, which you're very much rooted in. And so but you're creating this kind of like personal experience for folks. And, but a lot of your other work has been very participatory. And I'm wondering how you've negotiated those two things, and why is this particular installation, why does it seem to be so much more kind of, it really does appear to be this kind of personal, you have to experience it alone almost, right? Almost as like you have to take a kind of, what is it, a spiritual journey to arrive at it. Am I reading it right, or am I off?
I think you're pretty right. I think that because it's something, well, you know, it's funny. I went to the previous show at Unison, and I went by myself, and I was wandering around one day, and I had just gone hiking nearby. And I think it's also great where Unison is located. There's a lot of really great trails in the area. And I don't know if I would necessarily call it a spiritual experience, but it felt very reflective, because I had just walked around in the woods, and then I went by myself, and I didn't speak to anybody, and I just walked around the yards and looked at all the work. And I almost discovered each piece because they were at various locations. So I think that private experience is probably what informed this sculpture, this work. Is something that I think I would like for people to encounter or find in a more quiet way, but also in a way where they can hopefully wait or stay, or, I mean, because it will have aspects of an altar, so perhaps people, if they feel compelled, can even leave items there. I'm also considering, I'm not sure about maybe making a bench or like a kneeling area or something where people can feel more invited to inhabit the space for a little while. But yeah, I think that there is an element of a more like how the woods have these more private, I think you could say, experiences. I think that element is there.
Yeah, the word I had forgotten was pilgrimage.
Mm.
And yeah, I think a kneeling area is so interesting. I mean, where is Catholicism in contemporary art today? I mean, do people ask that question at all anymore? Like, I mean, it used to be everywhere, and now where is it? I mean, do you find yourself uh, wondering that? I mean, are you kind of aiming for a resurrection of Catholicism in contemporary art, or is
Um,
this?
Not
No,
particular.
I bet not.
Yeah, not. I think no, not particularly. Um,
Is your Catholicism one that anybody can kind of, because this is a particularly uh, recognizable Catholic artifact, these
yeah,
bathtub
but I
Marys.
plan to have it kind of broken down. Like the actual figure, I want it to be muddy and have a veil over it. And other than that, in the bathtub, I don't think. I feel like it could be maybe any other deity, and I'm also interested in the syncretism of how other, but not necessarily the appropriation, but how other saints and other cultures link up to Catholic saints, and people have done that so that they can still worship their deities. So I think that that is more interesting to me. That almost what had to be hidden, and I think maybe revealing that quality to Catholicism, if that makes sense, rather than Catholicism itself. And again, I don't want it to look too, I guess just the shape of it kind of has that structure. But again, I want it to be more of the earth and even decaying, like breaking down to a
Mhm.
degree.
Yeah, another time, I mean, for maybe another conversation, I'd be very interested to hear about your feelings about Catholicism and what, how they're affecting your practice more and more, or at least in this project in particular, it seems like. Um, uh, so Eliza, let's ask you a question. By the way, folks, tomorrow I'll be talking with Eliza much more in depth, 10 a.m. as part of the Delaware Valley Arts Alliance's River Fest, which is a kind of a festival. Not now it's online, but it's usually a street festival for art, music, and ecology. So I recommend you all look it up. It's going to be on Facebook Live, starting at 10 a.m. tomorrow on Delaware Valley Arts Alliance's Facebook page. And we're going to talk about All the Way to Hell. We're going to talk about your efforts to interrupt power. And, hi, Eliza, how are you?
Hey, Tal.
Are you, I'm wondering how you made the leap from Transpire to these more legal approaches. Your work is always about power, but you go from something that's so visceral, right? Transpire is the one where you wrap these trees in plastic wrap. I mean, it's such an intense gesture, and then you go from that really you feel it. It's a visceral thing, right? You feel terrible for the trees, when you see them in person. Like, who in their right mind would do this? You go from that to something that's so entirely conceptual. And I mean, obviously the cores themselves are physical. You feel them. It's very hard to relate to the depth.
Yeah.
That's hardly possible.
Yeah,
But
that's why I think having 3D components is really important.
yeah, you do feel that way. I'm wondering, like, how you made your transition into conception, into, like, fairly conceptual practice.
Well, it's not. I'm materially promiscuous, so I will use whatever materials I need to get the job done. In this instance, it just happens to be the law. And I'm not a lawyer. It's a little, there are asterisks on my website. I'm not a lawyer. I don't play one on the web, but I've read a lot of law, and I figured this out by myself. And I just you know, so that I wouldn't have to pay lawyers tons of money. I had to pay them money to confirm it, you know, like, this is a way to be extremely irritating to oil companies. Uh, you know, and the price of it, you know, and you don't have to go to the Dakotas and hang out in the freezing cold, and you're doing it before anything is out of the ground, which I think, so I mean, it's also a supply chain issue. Like, you can protest a pipeline because it's massive and it's the scar that, you know, runs across the country, and you can see when the spills happen what is damaged, but it's already out of the ground. And, you know, even despite the enormous and very consequential winds we had, you know, this week. But it's better if we just keep that ancient archive at 10,000 feet. Let's keep it intact. And so the way to do that is with a mineral deed that is registered in the Creek County, you know, clerk's office. And I hope that, I mean, I can register them digitally, but I would love to just go with a stack of new deeds, go into the clerk's office, you know, with a friend with an iPhone, and just make this process much more interpersonal for everybody who's involved. Yeah, so it's, you know, it's still social sculpture, whether or not we like the term, is what it is.
Right. I mean, it reminds me of Aviva Rahmani's Blue Trees Symphony, right?
For
Where
sure.
she paints trees blue, and there's part of this larger project, and these particular trees are in the path of a pipeline. And if the oil companies were to come and cut down the trees, she could argue that they would be destroying her artwork. And it's also part of this larger kind of aesthetic legal apparatus that she's constructing that interrupts this process, which I think is this kind of extractive process. And I'm really interested to see how your project evolves, and I'm excited to see what happens when you've sold the 1,000th share. You know, and
yeah, well, it doesn't. I mean, the more people that participate, the better the project. But it doesn't even have to be fully realized to work. You can have 500 people or 200 people and still frustrate the ambitions of the drillers. But I think, you know, in the U.S. is very peculiar because private individuals actually own the minerals. In, you know, most places it's the state. I think some regions of Canada they can do, but this is because the federal government did this to encourage Western expansion, which, you know, going back a little bit to the question you asked Alejandro about public space, this, to my mind, should be a public space. But because it's private, we in the US we have a special opportunity to really confound the exploitation process. And it will be especially so if the next administration, you know, there's enough pressure to bear that they stop fracking on federal land, which puts more pressure on private owners. I don't have, I believe, this data is very hard to get to, but I believe roughly 12 million families in the United States received $22 billion in royalties from the oil and gas business the last year anybody measured. So it's a lot of people, a lot of money. Of course, it's concentrated at the higher end, but then there are tons of people like me with these fractional holdings who want to hang on to them and exploit them. But it's very hard to find out who they are. Like in developers, you can figure out who owns what with some effort. But this is about, you know, mineral owners have to be responsible for what the government says they own.
I mean, what was possibly the most fascinating part of your presentation, because I already know about your work, is that I didn't realize that you had never been to Oklahoma. And I think that it almost, it underscores so clearly this disconnection that we had, that we all share, this idea that the fact that you can possess a piece of property you have never been to, is really mind blowing. You
And
know,
not the surface.
Alejandro, I see that you're
Yeah.
agreeing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's totally crazy.
Well, and this is why the battle over fracking in Pennsylvania and New York is much more visceral, because well, New York especially, it hasn't been exploited before, at least not as much as in Texas and Oklahoma. But, you know, but New York doesn't get off the hook because they now have banned fracking. I mean, I think that's great, but it's a complicated issue. New York still runs on natural gas. So it's somebody else's natural gas. So the people in Pennsylvania have to live with the consequences of New York's choices. And also at the same time, you have, specifically Cuomo has told all those, you know, struggling farmers in the southern tier of New York that the immense wealth they're sitting on top of, they cannot access. So that's hard to tell somebody that their farm is going to go belly up because they can't get help from the fossil fuel industry. Yeah, I do see both sides of this, and people from the southern tier moving to Pennsylvania for jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think fracking is the answer at all, but it does get into these real, you know, that attachment that a farmer has for his or her land, that is visceral and that is real.
Right.
May I ask a question real quick?
Who's
Eliza, hello.
Hey.
Fantastic, amazing counter to the issue or the problem. And it's you've inherited this property, and that's really interesting. And it's but you've never been there, and you don't live there, and so it's that makes like this thing that you're doing amazing and doable, in the sense that this is not your home. It's just a piece of land that you've inherited. So how do you see that relating to, like, because it's a fantastic idea, you know, I mean, I get it, you know, to the to someone who actually lives on their land, and how to address that you know, I mean, maybe it's a mute argument, because if you live there, you have the choice to, you know, do whatever you want, but
no, you don't have the choice.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
exactly.
there are a lot of people who are being forced to be fracked in Pennsylvania who would rather not be. I mean, there are a lot of artists who live in eastern Pennsylvania, and it destroys community, the fights over this, for those who want to maintain the way things are. And because when fracking goes in, it breaks everything, you know, water, electricity, schools, you know, everything. And then, well, anyway, we won't get into that. But where I'm seeing, so yes, I own this. I've never been there. I'm an absentee landlord of sorts. So are a lot of mineral owners, just because, you know, this is family. My great grandfather purchased these mineral rights, and he wasn't from there. He worked there. So he moved there from Tennessee, and then he moved back to Tennessee, which is where I am now, hanging out, taking care of my folks. But this is also proof of concept for other areas. So if someone has a 100-acre farm or a 1,000-acre farm, if they wanted to slice off a tiny fragment and work with me in doing something very similar to what we're doing here, because it may be the best alternative. And it really is for, I mean, the 1,000 acres, they can do what they want, but the 100 acres, they can't do what they want. You have to have 640 acres to do what you want. And in Western states, it's twice that amount in some states. So, you know, shocker, the system was built to benefit those with resources.
Could I also ask a question?
Sure. And
this will be my video.
This will be the last one. Oh, okay. let me see if I can start your video for you.
Okay.
This will be the last question, folks. Michael, hi, Michael. Before
Hi.
you ask your question, I just want to, after this question, we're just going to say goodbye. I want to remind everybody, if you can, please donate to Unison. The link is in the chat, and it's unisonarts. You'll see it here. It's in the chat. Also in the chat are Alejandro, Melinda, and Eliza's websites, if you're interested in learning more about them. And I really want to thank all of you for joining us today. It's been really wonderful. Michael, take it away.
Okay, and thank you, Tal. These talks are amazing. So I can't say how fabulous they've been. My question's for Eliza. It's actually two parts. I hope I'm not overstepping. But the first one's really a technical question. In your diagram, you showed your little plot coming to a single point. Let's call that the hell point. Kind of expanding out very slowly to your plot. But then you talked about the fact that it extends up into the heavens, right? So that there's a hell component and then there's kind of a heavens component. Does it just continue expanding out in that same shape? Does it get bigger as it extends into the sky?
That's a great question, but sadly, the answer is no, because with the advent of airplanes, the federal government decided that heaven actually ended at 400 feet.
Okay.
And in cities it's more for obvious reasons. But yeah, so your air rights, outside of, tall urban areas, your air rights extend to 400 feet, not above.
Okay, so there's an atmospheric kind of limit.
Yeah, because it would make air travel.
Well, it also, my thought for a moment
complicated.
was this extends your holding kind of infinitely.
Well, that would be awesome. And as intended originally, that is the way it would be.
Okay,
I
okay.
didn't know about airplanes.
So the other thing I was just wanting to ask you, because I think that the project has so much potential and to sort of disrupt the petroleum industry in such a big way, I wondered, and I'm not second guessing your ability to leverage this in any way, shape, or form. I have total faith that you're going to do amazing things with this. But there are people out there who are just kind of like magnificent leveragers, like the Yes Men or somebody like that. Have you thought of sort of partnering with somebody like that to really kind of get them as much mileage out of this kind of spectacular concept?
I would love to talk to basically anybody. I mean, environmental groups, but the Yes Men, of course.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes. Everybody on this call, you guys are seeing the debut of this project as envisioned. At Thomas Urban, there's it's in the gallery, but guess what? Not a lot of traffic. But it's an entirely different type of presentation, and later on I'll be talking about it in a similar way. But you guys are first.
Yeah.
So so thanks for being the guinea pigs for me to talk about this to a group and try out some ways to talk about this, because it's actually a really simple idea, but to get there there are lots of layers of complexity that I've got to work on. So thanks for letting me work it out.
Thanks for sharing it.
Yeah.
Eliza, your piece is all the way to hell. Melinda's is all the way to heaven. And Alejandro asks us to live right here.
That's right.
With each other.
Yeah.
And on that note, I want to thank our artists again, Eliza Evans, Melinda Kiefer, Alejandro Chellet. Thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you to all you who asked questions, and thank you to all of you who showed up and listened in today on Facebook Live or on Zoom. These talks, all of them are recorded. They'll all be up on YouTube and on Unison's website. So again, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Have a lovely day. And as we always do, you can, say goodbye. You can open your video for a moment and say goodbye. And I'll just, hi, Alessandro, nice to see you. Hi, Betty. Hey, everybody. Nice to see all your faces. Thank you all for being on mute this whole time and for listening in. It's been lovely. All right. Have a lovely day. Take care.